Hi, everyone. Hello and welcome to Alta Live. I am so excited that so many of you are joining us for today's conversation on Esprit Park in the Dogpatch neighborhood of San Francisco. If you don't know San Francisco, the Dogpatch is in the southeast kind of corner of the city, formerly very industrial. This park is called the Esprit Park because it was right next door to the Esprit clothing brand's headquarters. And if you are like me and grew up in the Bay Area in the 1980s, that place and its outlet was like the dream destination for clothes shopping with an agreeable parent, if at all possible. But the park next door to the Esprit, the former Esprit headquarters, had become kind of a point of contention in the Dogpatch neighborhood. Writer Julie Zigoris details the kind of drama surrounding the renovation and reopening of Esprit's Park in the Dogpatch. She wrote about it for Alta's newsletters, which are free, and hopefully all of you are subscribing to. They're free. You can go to altaonline.com, sign up for all of our newsletters. So she's going to kind of detail more of that conversation or more from that article. Tell us kind of that there are a few things that didn't make the newsletter that we're excited to hear about. And for those of you that haven't gotten a chance to read it, she's going to detail. I mean, they poisoned trees. Tree poisoning was involved in the drama around putting this park together. Before we dive in, I want to tell you about Julie and about Alta. Julie Zigoris is a storyteller in San Francisco where she works to uncover the people and places that make this city unique. Her work has been honored by the Society of Professional Journalists, the San Francisco Press Club, the LA Press Club, and the Journalism Association of Community Colleges. And we are psyched to have her here today. She is zooming in like I am. I'm at the Alta's offices today in San Francisco. It's nice to see Ramona, California, Texas, Castro Valley, Noe Valley, Ukiah, Tracy. For those of you that don't yet know Alta, the magazine, we are an award-winning quarterly focused on California and the West. Oh, Toronto, New York City. Hi, everyone. I feel like Miss Nancy from Romper Room. Did you guys see Miss Nancy when she'd be like, "Hi, Kevin. Hi, Susie. Hi, New York City. Hi, Toronto." Have you heard about Alta Journal? You can subscribe to us for $50 a year. You get 4 gorgeous issues of Alta, as well as a gift. The current gift is a collection of all of our cartoons that have appeared in the print magazine, Altitudes. So I hope that you'll support the work we do by joining us as a member. We also host free events like this, Alta Live every Wednesday at 12:30, and the California Book Club the third Thursday of the month. We've got incredible authors lined up for this spring. Welcome, welcome. And hi, Gary from Oklahoma. So excited to see you, Gary. Oklahoma, Oklahoma, Oklahoma. All right, with that, I'm curious, what do you have this kind of drama around a park in Oklahoma, Gary? I can't imagine that you do. Julie, welcome. Can you give us, you wrote about the drama surrounding Esprit Park in the Dogpatch for our newsletter. How did you come to even hear about this issue?
So I had actually written a piece about the history of Esprit, the clothing brand, and I had developed a little side beat for myself as an arts and culture reporter, reporting on the Gap, reporting on Levi's, and it's kind of surprising, but San Francisco has a little bit of a clothing street cred to it, which people don't really think about because we don't think of San Francisco as a fashion city, but there's a lot of really famous clothing brands that have found their start here in San Francisco, and Esprit is one of them. And Susie Tompkins Buell, who founded Esprit, still lives in San Francisco and is a wonderful human being. She's very active in the Democratic Party these days, and she still devotes a lot of time and energy to San Francisco. But the founding of Esprit was extremely scrappy. I mean, the first dresses were sold out of a VW van, and, she really just did it on a lot of, uh, heartfelt, interest and a lot of scrappiness. And this was before she had any money. And it really was a success. And she ended up opening the headquarters of the brand in the Dogpatch, which at that time, it was a very bold move. There was nothing out there. It was really just an industrial, bleak area that had nothing there. And she picked it really because there was a lot of parking and it was accessible to the freeways. And she saw this sort of potential there. along with her husband, Mark Tompkins. And the two of them went on to found North Face after Esprit. So you can see they're sort of like clothing royalty, right? But Esprit, when they opened, it was a very unusual brand in the sense, very forward thinking in the sense that they would have a corporate park for their employees. This was not something, that was typical for the time. Again, this is 1980. So the park opened in 1982 and they planted redwoods in the park. They had a tennis court for employees to play in. It was a private park only for the employees. And they would bring in lecture series and have guest speakers, everything from, talks on feminism to the AIDS crisis. And so it was really this kind of energizing space from its very outset. And I think there was always a sense in the redesign process that they wanted to capture or keep some sort of that original ethos alive of Esprit Park and the spirit of Esprit. That was such an innovative space, which, is also a little bit of the neighborhood itself. Dogpatch is known as a neighborhood of innovators and makers, and people who do things are the kinds of people who live in Dogpatch.
So this park existed. Esprit's headquarters are no longer in the Dogpatch. Fun
Yeah.
fact, I was an intern there once. I got to use the
Oh,
park.
wow.
Yeah,
Lucky
when I was
you.
19. Um, but it was a really kind of modern industrial space. Um, just a clarification from Kat, by the way, Doug Tompkins
Oh,
was the
sorry. Yes,
founder.
that's correct.
Mark Buell is her
Yeah, yeah.
current husband. Thank you, Kat Clark, for that correction. But so how did this park, once Esprit moved away or whatever, how did this park come under the purview of San Francisco government, Parks and Rec or whoever? Did San Francisco buy this from Esprit and then kind of need to figure out what to do with it?
So Susie Tompkins actually donated the park to the city. So Esprit moved out in 1996 when they left the city. And Susie Tompkins Buell donated the park to the city as a tax write-off. So it was a kind of an advantageous move on their part to unload the park in that way. And for a while, the park was a little bit in this kind of no man's land because the city at that time, they didn't really want another park to manage. They weren't really necessarily interested right away in having another city park. And so there were some ideas floated to potentially develop the park, and those didn't really take off. And this was also 1996 was the year that Friends of Spree Park was founded. And this community organization really banded together to preserve and protect this space. And they did plantings there. They would maintain the area. They would, make sure that it was well taken care of and looked after. And they did a very good job of it. And it wasn't until 2001, about 5 years later, that the Esprit Park did officially become a rec and park, and it was transferred to be a city park. And then
Okay.
after that came the many years of wear and tear of, much overuse of this park. So the neighborhood continued to grow over the
What do you
years.
mean by overuse?
So there's this one tiny 2-acre park, right, for a neighborhood that, in the last decade has grown over 200%. So many people flooding into this area. And there's this one, there's Crane Cove Park now, but Crane Cove Park didn't open until 2020. So, you have a lot of people coming into this area. And there's only one real green space. And so this Esprit Park just got overused and abused. And there's this sense, it's even in the name, right? Dogpatch. Like people just got the sense like this is where you take your dogs, and this is the dog park, and dogs come here, and this park is meant for dogs. And some of the sources that I spoke to for this article, they would remember, more than 40 dogs at a time being there at night, running off leash, to the point where people, especially people with kids, just didn't even feel safe going into the park because they just felt like, oh, my kid is going to get trampled or run over. And, it just, didn't feel like the kind of environment you would want to bring your family for a picnic, say, or go and hang out and, linger. It just felt like a place that was starting to come apart, right? And the trees were dying, landscaping was in distress.
And
It was,
technically, the city was responsible for this, for the upkeep of the park. It was the
mhm,
Esprit Park was just on their list of many, many parks in San Francisco, and it kind of literally went to the dogs.
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when did this plan for a renovation and community input happen?
Yes. Yes. So it's kind of crazy because it's been such a long process, and going back, looking at some of the documents, it's really the planning meetings began all the way back in 2017. And Fletcher Studio, who created the final design for the park, he even was trying to remember, when did I actually first start working on this project? Because it had been so long. And it was 2017, 2018 that he and his studio started coming up with a design. And Fletcher Studio, he was really seen as, by the community and by many of the sources I spoke with, the only architect who would be able to take on this project, because he has done so many of these thorny, difficult, city involved projects. So, and on these early planning meetings, surveys of the community, and, city organized meetings where the community was getting together, you can see already that there is squabbling between the dog camp and the kid camp. And you can see it written on the documents where, people are writing, oh, maybe more people would come to the park if there weren't so many dogs. And there's plenty of people who come to the park. And, oh, well, maybe not if there's so much, dog feces and urine for the kids. And, well, dog owners don't like poop either. And so there's actually writing back and forth on these documents, handwriting of people, going back and forth at each other. And you can see just how contentious it is at these meetings represented. And, it dragged on and on, the design process, because of how to negotiate a compromise in the design plan, whether to have fencing, whether to have artificial turf, whether to have on leash, off leash, no dogs at all.
But who gets to debate this? I guess my question is, if the city owns the park, but
Yeah.
Susie Tompkins donated to the city, they own the park. Did it change between when the city took over in 2001 or whenever it was
Yeah.
to 2017, that now the public gets all of this input, this power? It seems like opening it up to the entirety of the Dogpatch neighborhood, or anyone with a dog or a kid that might come play here, is a recipe for disaster, because no one's ever going to agree on anything. I mean, you and I might
Yeah.
not agree on, the right way of doing this. Why in 2017 were all of these different groups afforded so much power over the design of a park?
I mean, I think there has to be community buy-in for the final design. These community surveys that are sent out by Rec and Park, there has to be official buy-in by the community for the plan to move forward. And, there can be questions around, are they getting everyone? Are they reaching everyone? How are they distributed? I ask questions about that. How do they know they're reaching everyone or surveying and I think there's all kinds of questions you can ask about that. And, for a while there, it looked like there was, especially over the artificial turf question, that was because some people just didn't want to budge on, we can't have artificial turf. But if you don't have artificial turf, then the sod has to be constantly replaced if you have dogs off leash. And that's kind of how the park got destroyed in the first place. And so, it was just this stalemate, and you need a certain percentage of community buy-in to move the process forward. And it was just kind of locked for a while, it wasn't moving forward. And then add to the complication that there were always new people moving in. to the dog patch, who to dog patch, know that shows you off as a as a newbie, new people moving into dog patch who didn't know the whole process, who then had to be explained everything and wanted to restart everything from the beginning. So then that kind of slowed things down and made things even more frustrating for people who had said, hey, we've been at this for years. Please don't throw a wrench into this. So, it became very messy, very, very messy.
We should point out to our viewers who aren't in San Francisco or didn't live in San Francisco in the early 21st century that the dog patch went from, when the Esprit headquarters were there, from a mostly industrial area to, and then with kind of like funky artists and creatives living over in that area in lofts and what have you, too. And there's lots of that kind of classic San Francisco residential architecture that is so famous. But it became, with the dot-com boom, it became very popular, and gentrified is probably a word that's been used many times about the dog patch. And so all sorts of people are flooding into this neighborhood, and a lot of them have dogs. They are dog people and they are family people. Can you tell us about those two factions that I'm fascinated as both a dog owner and a parent as dogs versus kids and how that came to be? Because both are pretty great.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there are also a lot of people who have both. And it was funny how people would, when I would talk to them, they would identify themselves to me as either a dog person or a kid person, or, oh, I have both, And so it would almost, you'd try to make clear, which side you were on. But I think there are many people who are on both sides. And so, in some ways, this debate is, the kind of division in some ways is a bit forced. And yet it was real because it was trying to make a compromise between these two sides. And it was that tension between the dog side and the kid side and the division. I mean, it's very real. That's how the park's compromise came to be, was having this, dog-free South Meadow and then the North Meadow, where dogs can run off leash on artificial turf, and with no fence, because if you had the fence, then dog walkers would come and use the park. And so the real
We
question was,
don't want dog walkers to come and use the
yeah,
park?
they don't want dog walkers
Why?
because then you get hordes of dogs coming, and the professional dog walkers come, and then it
Do you
takes.
have to be a resident to use the park? I mean, so what if dog walkers come?
I think because when dog walkers come, they come with giant packs of dogs, and then the sense is then it kind of like takes over the park. Parks that have fences attract dog walkers, and then there's too many dogs. So
I'm going to share my screen really briefly, folks, so that you can see what we're looking at. Can everyone see this? This is, and Julie, can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, so this is kind of the compromise that we're looking at right now. Am I right?
Yeah, so that's the compromise. And then you can see this barrier between the two. And in some ways, this is a very innovative, I mean, not some ways, it is a very innovative design and a new approach, in the sense that this barrier is just a low wall, right? And so it's a very fluid barrier. It's not a barrier that, is a fence between the two. So it is relying on people being compliant. And just given the sort of history here, and all the intense feelings around this park, I think a lot of people were scared that, will people really, honor this dog-free and area versus dogs allowed off leash area, especially
Which
since
side is the dog area and which side is the
the
non-dog?
South Meadow is dog free.
Dog free. North Meadow is dogs welcome. I see no playground.
Yeah, and that's another, this is kind of why I made the point in the article, the dogs ultimately won out, because in all these design iterations, there was never a design that was looked at that was entirely dog free. Like that was just not a design that was on the table. And there was a design that was all leashed, but that didn't last very long at all. And then you can also see there's no playground. There's these 4 picnic areas in the corners, and they have some exercise equipment, but there's no playground for kids. So, it does feel like the dogs kind of won.
It's like, that's so interesting. So South Meadow, dog free, North Meadow, dogs welcome. How, when did they finally land on this? When did the powers that be go, okay, 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 dog people, you win. Here's, this is the renovation concept design that we have settled on. And can you tell us about some of the kind of surprising occurrences that happened? Like there was tree poisoning. I mean, someone genuinely poisoned. They are able to prove that this tree is not dying of natural causes. Someone is actively poisoning trees in this area as presumably a protest about the park renovations path.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah, so the construction contract was awarded in 2022, and then the project began in earnest in early 2023. Um,
So it
and
took from 2017 to 2023 just to even begin.
yeah,
Got
there was that much planning and neighborhood meetings, and yes, there was just a very long, long chunk of
it.
planning.
6 years,
But
yeah.
then even the construction, I mean, what was so fascinating about reporting on this piece was, there's this kind of plastic tarp sign hanging on the fencing around the construction fencing around the project. And it said, Esprit Park renovation project, early 2023 to fall 2023, as in the completion date is fall 2023. And when I went to take pictures the first time when I was doing my reporting and interviewing someone there on site, the 2023 had a little, plastic sticker on top of it that said 24 pasted on top of the. And then the next time I went, somebody had like ripped it off so you could see that the 23 was behind it. So, it had gone from early 2023 to fall 2024, 23, but then was taped over to be 24. So a year later. And then the next time I went, the sign was completely taken down because really the park didn't end up opening up until the next year in 2025. And so, there's also a little bit of like this kind of when the moving dates, sometimes there's an erasure of what the expected date was originally going to be planned to be. So it's hard to find, what was the original date going to be, so that people kind of forget what was the original anticipated date of the
Forget
open.
that they're so behind, that
Yeah,
they're screwing
exactly.
this up. They're taking too long.
Yeah.
Okay, but who poisoned the tree?
And then your question about the tree poisoning. Yeah. So in 2023, they found, holes drilled into the trees, which made it look like very intentional. And an arborist confirmed, and I spoke with this with someone from Fletcher Studio who had been working on the Esprit renovation project, confirmed that there had been deliberate poisoning of the trees in Esprit Park. And just given the emotions around this project and sort of the heated nature of this sort of, tots versus dogs. And, we didn't even talk about some of the other groups yet, but, just there was a lot of feelings around this project, and a lot of different stakeholders and people involved. And there was some suspicion that this could have been intentional. Now, I want to add a big asterisk to that we don't know, right? This could have been a one-off. This could have been somebody from the outside.
Just
We
like a
actually,
tree bandit who
yeah,
happened
the
upon this
bandit,
park.
somebody playing a joke. This could be somebody who had no idea about the renovation of Esprit Park. So we really don't know. And this person has never been caught. They haven't figured out who did it. So for us to surmise, it's really just, it's us guessing, it's,
Right. But a tree was definitely poisoned
yes.
in the midst of this very contentious debate over who this park should serve and in what way they should serve. Okay, so tell us about the other groups involved with we've got the tot people, we've got the dog people. Who else? Who else has
Well,
a
really, there's just one
dog?
other. I mean, there's Friends of Esprit Park, which I mentioned, which started soon, right away. But then there's also Toes and Paws for Green Space, which, as you can tell, is more of a dog oriented group. And so that's another group that was advocating, founded early on and advocating more for the dog, side of things. And then there's the Dogpatch Neighborhood Association, which is more towing a neutral line and trying to get everyone to the table and work on a compromise. So you have these different groups, and they all, like Friends of Esprit Park has been around for a really long time, so they feel very invested, and they feel like the caretakers of the park. Then Toes and Paws for Green Space, they are advocating really for the dogs, and dog advocacy groups are very powerful in San Francisco. We're the only state, I believe, that has a national park that allows dogs in it. I don't think there's any other place in the US that has that possibility, Golden Gate Recreation Area. So, the dog advocacy groups are extremely effective in the Bay Area. So, that the Toes and Paws for Green Space also is a very important and vocal group. So, you have these different people and personalities, and all of it kind of coming to a head, and over this tiny space. And so in a neighborhood that also, I'm not sure if this made it into the article either, but this neighborhood lacks a lot of infrastructure. There's no sidewalks in a lot of places. There's no stop signs or stop lights. There's no trash cans, So even though this neighborhood was voted one of the coolest, a few years ago by Time Out, and so many people are moving there for all the cool restaurants and hip bars. At the same time, there's a lot of things that are lacking in this neighborhood. And, the green space is one of them. And people are, it's the emotions run high because of that. And this park project, while people were ecstatic that it did finally happen, it was at a very high price tag after a very long time. And so while people are very happy to see it end and happy that a compromise was reached, I think there's also a little sense of, disappointment that it had to, they feel like a little bit cheated that it took this much out of them.
Well, yeah, I mean, over 7 years of discussing, debating, fighting about it. The park is finally opened. I don't get the no play. Just pop a playground in there. But okay, no playground. Dogs can be off leash, assuming they are on voice command. I know a little. As a dog owner, I know a little, but I also know that like dog people can be very intense about like the rules of their dog and whatever. Um, how has the park been doing? It opened a month ago, not even. So do
Yes.
you have any kind of update on the success, or is it too early to tell?
Well, what I've heard so far is people are loving it, and that so far people are being very compliant. So, I think it's great news. I think, it's a real testament to a community win, and, that if you struggle hard enough and wait long enough, you will, end up getting what you want. And, you
If you
know,
have a dog. Denise points out, actually, I'm going to dive in with some audience reaction here. And folks,
sure, yeah.
pop it in the chat or the questions um, as the rains come down on us. Denise says, greetings from South Market in San Francisco. Hi, Denise, I can probably yell at you. It's so sad that children are so much lower priority than dogs in San Francisco. Dogs are beloved, but San Francisco is not so friendly for elders, low income, and unhoused persons and persons with disabilities. I am jealous of the dogs. Does
Mm.
this seem, and not to say that animals aren't deeply valued and beloved family members, but the prioritization of dogs over kids or families, um, does that say something larger about kind of where San Francisco's priorities or values lie? San Francisco is famously a non-kid friendly city. Um, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I'm a bit torn myself too about just because personally, full disclosure, I am both a dog parent and a human parent. And so, I can kind of see both. And sometimes I do get a bit frustrated about this stereotype of San Francisco as, no people have children here and there's more dogs than kids. And no one raises kids in San Francisco, because I do think San Francisco can be a wonderful place to raise children. And we do exist, people with children in San Francisco. But yeah, I definitely see what the speaker is saying. I think that, I mean, I should send you a link, for anybody who wants to do some further reading about, this deep dive I did on sort of the dog culture in San Francisco and the training behaviors, where people, just the amount of money that people will spend on their dogs and, training them and calling out other people for not using the correct training practices. I mean, it's kind of insane. And when I got a look at that up close, I was really shocked to see that. I mean, it was almost worse than parenting, people chiding each
I
other.
was gonna say though, people do that with parents too.
Well, that's what I mean. It's
You've gone
like,
front facing already?
yeah, you kind of expect that
There's
with parenting, but to see it with dogs.
the parenting shaming, the dog owner shaming. Yeah, I
Yeah.
both are very it's a specific personality and a minority in both of those dog ownership and parenting groups, but that is definitely a loud minority. Um, Carrie Terry points out, and this is a great point to my very casually. See, I'm like a member of the public. Why don't you have a playground? Put a playground in there. If a playground was inserted in the space, points out Terry, it would need to have a fence around it. The insurance to host a park might be more expensive than what the city wants to include. So I mean, clearly there are all of these complex
Considerations.
bureaucratic
Yeah.
needs that it's really easy to roll up with your kid and your dog and say, well, what about this? I'd like there to be this. But the realities of making that happen for a city of 1 million people is probably a lot more complicated than citizen A.
Yeah. Also, Lisa's point about Tunnel Tops. I mean, Tunnel Tops is such a successful park, and it was actually used as the basis for National Geographic's including San Francisco as one of the top travel destinations to visit in the world in, I believe it was in 2023. So, Rec and Park is on a building sort of just zenith right now, opening parks, one bigger than the next, just Phil Ginsburg is on a roll.
Bill
And,
Ginsburg is the head of San Francisco Parks and Rec.
in terms of just really doing these incredible projects. So, there's a lot to celebrate in terms of parks in San Francisco, and, not to be all doom and gloom and naysayer, with Esprit Park is sadly, was a challenging project. And I think everybody can acknowledge it was a very challenging project. There are also really amazing, successful park stories in San Francisco right now. So, they're not all like this. Yeah.
Yeah, Kevin points out that kind of entitled mindset, which I'm guilty of as a parent and a dog owner, can be the same with bicyclists. San Francisco is also a notoriously, bike friendly, or it tries to be a bike friendly city, and that's the cyclists are a vocal lobby as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
Ed, so with now that the park is opened, is this just the status quo? There is no what's the park is opened. Is there an opportunity for the stakeholders, neighbors, these different groups to continue to advocate for changes they want to see? Or once a park is designed and opened, this is it for a while, folks. Take it or leave it. Or are discussions continuing to happen? Is the drama past? Is it over and done? Has the soap opera ended, or does it continue? And in little bits here and there?
Uh, I am not entirely sure the answer to that question, but my sense is that this is it. Nobody wants to have more debate or discussion around this. And people, yeah, there's not, the design process is finished. The park is open. There's not an opportunity now to tweak things or revisit things. There's just not really, I don't know by what forum one would do that because the project is considered complete. So I think that everybody is ready and happy to. I mean, the sense of palpable relief. And it was so funny the week that this park opened because, I went to the opening celebration for the park and it was that week of the crazy atmospheric rivers. And so
Oh,
every
yeah.
day it was pouring rain, just pouring rain. And then the one day that the park opened, it was like this beam of sunshine. And it was as if, the city knew like we need sunshine on this one day for this park to open because everyone's been waiting for it for 7 years. So give us sunshine. And I think everyone's just so, relieved and happy that the park is here and people can use it. And they finally have this green space back again that no one is ready or willing to request any kind of tweak or change.
Even though it's covered in turf and there's no playground and
Yeah.
it is what it is. All right, last question for you, Julie. We've gone a little bit over. You have said here that you are both a parent and a dog owner. I didn't give you this one ahead of time. Can you name a San Francisco park that gets it right for both families and and dog families?
Dog families.
I'm trying to sound as inclusive as possible. Right for kids and dogs. They both kids and dogs can have a great safe time.
I mean, I would have to point to my local park, which that I live closest to, which is Presida Park, which I just love because I mean, one, dogs can have a great time there. They can run off leash. I don't know actually technically if it's legal or not, but dogs do run off leash there and have a great time. I've never seen any kind of dog fight there, dog altercation. The only scary thing I've seen happen is a dog run out of the park and get hit by a car, which was very scary. But and it's got just sort of like natural walls around it. It's not fenced so the dog walkers don't come. And it has a playground, a fenced playground at one end. So your kids can play, dogs can play separately. The only caveat to that is that if you are having a picnic, sometimes there are dogs and they can like run up and sniff your food. And that can be annoying both as a human who loves dogs, just because, you want to eat your food in peace. But I love Presida Park. I think it's a gem of a park that is not overly bold and sometimes forgotten, but it's just a sweet little park in the city.
For non-San Franciscans, if you want to visit Presida Park, it is at the end of Alabama Street in the Mission. It's where the Mission meets Bernal Heights, and there's an adorable little park. There's a really cute cafe right there too. I'm getting some shout outs for Francisco Park, Alta Plaza, and Lafayette Park as well from our if you want to take your kid and your dog to the same park. Julie, thank you so much for reporting on this story for us and for giving us the lowdown on the drama in the dog patch and around Esprit Park. Folks, if you are in the neighborhood, go swing by and check it out. The Esprit outlet is sadly closed. Um, for those of us that are devastated by that, I'm with you in solidarity. But Julie, thank you so much for taking the time today. We so appreciate having you. Folks, join us next week. We're going to talk about one of the seven wonders of California in our current issue, Mavericks. Mavericks is off the coast of around Half Moon Bay. It is a very popular and very dangerous surfing destination. We're going to speak with a writer and surfer who has surfed Mavericks many times and will tell us all about that. So with that, Julie Zigoris, Alta Contrib, thank you so much for joining
Thank
us.
you, Beth.
And everyone else, thanks for coming. Take care. Have fun at the park. Go to a park.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.